I have a feeling I might ruffle some griffin feathers with this video, but I think it would be interesting to put some of my hot takes out there and see what anyone who watches this video thinks. And to be clear, these are my opinions, and I don't even believe these are that great of opinions, honestly. They're just some things that I think I have an opinion about that isn't shared among the community. But I guess I'll see after this video goes up. So without further ado, let's start with my first hot take. The Unmoored world is better than the Everfall. Starting off really piping hot with this one, but in my opinion the Unmoored world is better than the Everfall. And I think in more ways than one. Firstly, the Unmoored world has a real reason for happening in Dragon's Dogma 2. Once the Arisen and Dragon fell into the brine and were subsequently killed, the Watchful One took the world into his own hands and set forth its imminent destruction. This isn't a suspension of disbelief in the story, as the brine are brought to your attention multiple times throughout the story as a force that is both mysterious and deadly. And the same goes for the Watchful One, appearing at different places and times along your quest. While the Everfall, I don't think I could ever guess a giant hole would open up in the middle of the city. I mean, it's really cool, but it didn't make sense from a story perspective for someone like me, who focuses more on what the game shows you. But let's look at the gameplay. Maybe the Everfall is better in that regard? Well, again, I'm going to have to say that the Unmoored world is better as well, as there are many more high-level and rare monsters like Dullahans, Drakes, Grim Ogres, and Gore Chimeras. There's a ticking clock, resource management, real stakes, as in you have to reset to the beginning of your last inn rest if you die, and on top of that, the whole map is drained of its oceans, allowing for exploration where there was previously only brine-infested waters. Meanwhile, the Everfall is just a series of reused rooms and areas that are all pretty boring and cookie-cutter, with enemies and bosses that leave a lot to be desired. I mean, the most interesting boss you can find there is the Dragon, and you're not even guaranteed to find that either, as the last time I did Everfall I couldn't find him at all. And even if you die, it's treated as any other death there. It doesn't reset progress or punish you in any way. So yeah, in my opinion, the Unmoored world is far more interesting, challenging, and fits the story much better. Hybrid vocations needed to go. With the release of Dragon's Dogma 2, we saw the removal of all hybrid vocations. Or in other words, vocations that allowed you to equip two weapons, both with their own set of skills. At first I thought this was a bit jarring and very limiting, but after playing for a while I started to appreciate what only having one weapon did for the game. I started to really feel like the weapon I chose mattered, as I couldn't rely on my secondary weapon to compensate. For example, let's take a look at the vocation of Magic Archer from both games. In Dragon's Dogma 1, it was possible to equip the magic bow in addition to daggers, allowing both a close range and long range set of attacks. This pretty much made Magic Archer have no downsides, and it is clearly leagues above most other vocations. But now let's look at it in DD2. In Dragon's Dogma 2, while Magic Archer can only equip the bow, it ends up feeling much more balanced. The skills it offers in Dragon's Dogma 2 are much more focused on the role that Magic Archer should play as, a medium to long range damage dealer, with a couple of support skills thrown in. And I think the change to make all vocations have only a single weapon at a time helped all of them in this way. All vocations feel much more focused and worth your time to play, offering unique experiences and playstyles, without all of the overlap muddying the waters. The story is about as good as the first game. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the story of Dragon's Dogma 2, and honestly, while the story of the game is nothing special, I think a lot of fans seem to think it's far worse than the first game's story. However, I don't think it really is, as the first game's story was just as minimal. Although I will say the beginning of the first game's story is much more interesting and compelling, as the dragon plays much more of a driving force for your journey, while the second half of the story of Dragon's Dogma 2 was better in my opinion. I think I feel this way because I really liked having a second region, and going there was tied to the story. It made journeying to Batal very exciting for me. What makes me think this is a hot take though is how many people think the story of Dragon's Dogma 2 was very bad compared to the first. However, I don't think the story was really the selling point of either game anyways. So to me, neither story is definitively the better story. It really depends on what makes you feel invested. Dragon's Dogma 2 is harder than the first game overall. Now I know that on the surface, stating the difficulty of the second game is higher than the first sounds crazy at first, as many of us probably remember the difficulty of the first game. However, I think that the first game was only very difficult early on, as most enemies took a lot of damage to kill and we started off with fairly low stats and almost no skills to compensate. But honestly, I feel as though the second game is more difficult overall. And let me explain. Since DD2 is a new-gen game, it has access to the hardware of next-gen consoles and PCs. This means that enemies don't have to be limited in numbers or complexity. So we can have situations where multiple large bosses are attacking at once. We can have situations where particles and magics are being spammed non-stop, and we can have enhanced enemy AI, leading to beautiful moments like this. What a marvel in technology. But these all come together to create really exciting moments that can test our skills and our patience. And on top of that, we have the changes to how health can be restored, as we can't fully heal without camping or ins, if you don't count the all heal elixir. And lastly, we have a big one. It's the staggering. There are so many situations in the game where getting staggered can mean life or death. It can be really frustrating, and I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, but it does increase difficulty a lot. So yeah, I truly believe that Dragon's Dogma 2 is a more difficult experience when you look at the bigger picture. The monster variety isn't that bad. Monster variety in 2 has been one of the most negatively received aspects of the game. But what would you say if I thought it wasn't that bad? Would you say, Nardo, you should put that in a hot takes video? Well, I really should do that, shouldn't I? Well, maybe one day. Well, today's the day, because I don't think it's that bad. There, I said it. If you've seen my last video, then you know I like most of the monsters and their differences. Do they add a lot to gameplay? For the most part, no. But they do add a lot to the world building, which I personally love a lot. Having subtypes of species makes the game feel much more real and immersive to me. And that's worth so much more to me in an RPG than any amount of unique monsters ever could. And to be fair, the game still does have a ton of unique and awesome monsters the first didn't have. The Dullahan, Minotaur, Medusa, Sphinx, Lesser Dragon, and Slimes are all really fun additions to the game. And that's not even mentioning the updates to older monsters. Some in particular that I like are the Ogre's climbing abilities, the ability to ride griffins, Golems, who honestly might as well be a new monster with how much has changed about them. The Eye Blast, Rage Mode, and ability to break off fortunes are all very cool. All these monsters got new and exciting things to spice them up, and honestly, I'm here for it. The monsters of DD2 are just amazing to me. I personally like the armor in DD2 more. Finally, I'm going to end it on a toasty take. It's not going to burn you, but I doubt it's a popular one. And it's the armor being oh so slightly better to me in Dragon's Dogma 2. Not the armor system, just the actual pieces of armor themselves. They did a really good job at creating some nice looking pieces, with some wilder sets thrown in for people who like those. I especially like the clothing made for the archers and thieves. They did a great job conveying that people who wear these sets are light on their feet and favor mobility over protection. While in the first game, a lot of sets could really be for any class, and didn't offer a lot of pleasing looks, and the limited character creation of the first game didn't help. My favorite part of DD2's armor is the capes as well. I absolutely love the capes, and it sounds really dumb, but finding new capes was actually a driving factor for me in exploring. I would travel to each end of the map in search of capes I haven't collected yet, and finding a new one made me very excited. Out of all my takes, I'd be interested in hearing your opinion on this one the most, so let me know in the comments. And there's my big pile of steaming hot takes. I'm sure you won't agree with all of them, but I guess that's just life. I think it's fun to discuss the game in any way, so I wanted to make this video. But anyways, that's the end of the list, so bye bye.